Situated off the coast of Namibia, the Orange Basin has become the latest oil exploration hotspot. It is attracting oil companies like flies to honey. To share some of the insights on what the hype is all about, I'm joined by David Thomson. He is the Vice President of Sub-Saharan Africa at Welligence Energy Analytics. David, thank you very much for joining me on Markets Magnified.
Nice to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Good to meet you.
So we're seeing big oil companies flocking to the tip of Africa. I'm talking Total Energy, Chevron, Shell. We're seeing Galp came on board as well. With so many industry giants, is the buzz warranted around the Orange Basin?
Yes, I mean, we believe it is. As ever, we've got to try and cut through the hype. So whenever the initial discoveries were made, firstly by Shell, then Total very shortly afterwards, which was the beginning of 22, there was some pretty incredible figures getting banded about 2, 3, 10 billion barrels of oil, etc., etc. Now, those have, in fairness, been reined in a bit, which is absolutely normal. But to give you an idea, you mentioned Total and Shell, and also Galp. Those three companies have been the most active. They've drilled wells, and given what we currently know, our expectation is those three companies are sitting on of the order of 3.5 billion barrels of oil that should be recovered. And the likelihood is that number is going to go up. Partly, those three companies will carry on drilling, and partly, you mentioned Chevron. There's also a few other companies that are in that Orange Basin in Namibia. They will also be drilling in the next year, 18 months, give or take, and we expect further discoveries. So, in answer, yes, the hype is real. We think.
So could we see this move really transform, I'm assuming, Namibia and Namibia's economy, almost like, the modern oil miracle we saw with Guyana? Is this something that could potentially happen for this country?
Yes, again, I mean, we believe that is likely. There's always a lot of hurdles to overcome. Discovering oil it's not the easy part, but it's not. It doesn't mean that the next part is less difficult or what have you. I mean, actually getting that oil to market is always going to be challenging, and particularly in these sort of areas, very, very deep water. Namibia has got no real upstream history, so it hasn't got experience to actually help these operators to develop the oil, and indeed gas. We can maybe go on to that later. So there's still definitely hurdles that have to be overcome, but we think it is Guyana is a very good analog. I mean, that's what the industry is looking at. Forgive me, I'm not entirely au fait with Guyana, but I mean I think it's roughly the same size of country. Maybe the
Yeah.
population's less, but overall, yes, we think that this could be absolutely transformational for Namibia. To give you an idea, at the moment, Namibia doesn't produce any oil, doesn't produce any gas. Now, those three finds that I mentioned, or those three companies that are actually sitting on a few finds, um, we think that has the potential that by early next decade, Namibia could be producing of the order of 1 million barrels a day. And that is just what has so far been found. If there's, as we expect, further upside, that number is going to go further up. So yes, I mean, Namibia, I think, population of 3 million people, give or take.
Yeah,
That
it's very
is,
sparsely populated, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, absolutely transformational for the country. I will say potentially, but I would say that we are pretty confident that it's going to be a material producer of oil within the next 5, 6, 7 years.
As a South African that's been living next door to Namibia, I'm really struggling to wrap my head around it. Namibia becoming this massive oil player, but it's
Well,
great. It's great. I think You mentioned the gas situation that could accompany this. I mean, and we know Namibia imports energy at the moment, and this could vastly transform the region's energy supply if we can get, sufficient gas production coming out of Namibia. This holds so much potential for South Africa and the rest of the region as well.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree. I mean, your first point with regard to, I mean, it's amazing to see Namibia coming to the table like this. Yes, I mean, we used to, I've been covering sub-Saharan upstream for 20 odd years or so, and it used to be, with all due respect to Namibia, it was it wasn't a big player, so it would be a country that would maybe, you'd cut your teeth on as a junior analyst. You'd look at it, you'd look at the exploration plays, you'd look at all this, but basically was not producing anything. And for many, many years, that was the case. I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of wells drilled, but the wells that were drilled were unsuccessful, with the exception of there's a gas field that was discovered back in '73 called Kudu. That is still borderline commercial, but that is really the only tangible discovery it had ever had before Shell and Total started this new wave of exploration success. So yes, absolutely, it's incredible that Namibia has come to the table. And in terms of the wider picture, yeah, the gas. I mean, as it stands at the moment, further drilling needs to be done. We are pretty sure there's a lot of gas in the discoveries that have been made so far. But there's been the operators are basically they're looking to produce the oil in their second phases of development. Then further down the line, potentially gas. Gas is obviously, despite the fact there's a good market potentially down in South Africa, without a doubt, it's still it's basically it's less valuable in the crudest form of the argument, or to try to frame it like that. So it's going to be a secondary consideration, but and also we have to understand exactly how much gas is there. But our expectation is there are going to be multiple TCFs of gas, 10, 15, 20 TCF. Now that potentially lends itself to an LNG development onshore in Namibia, potentially an floating LNG development offshore, but obviously potentially piping it down to South Africa. Namibia is obviously its domestic market's extremely small, so there's no way it can absorb anything like that sort of quantity of gas. But given your energy shortages and gas in particular, then yes, it could have very, very, very significant repercussions, or positive effects rather for South Africa if we can get that gas down there.
You mentioned earlier that there's still a lot of hurdles that they need to overcome before, oil is actually extracted and brought to market. And I know that there's it's extra difficult when it comes to deep sea drilling, if I'm understanding correctly. So, at what point, I suppose I'm asking about the rate of return, would investors go, okay, this project is not lucrative enough for us to go ahead with it? What are they? Where are they on this?
I mean, the, it's always difficult to say because each company will have their own different sort of metrics they look at. But broadly, they're looking at a net present value 15% discount rate before these before these projects will get across the line. Now, if they were shallow water or if they're onshore, you're probably looking at an NPV of maybe 10. But NPV 15, potentially even 20, we're seeing elsewhere. But we're comfortable that NPV 15 is probably what these companies are going to be looking at before they sanction. Given, as you said, I mean, it's incredibly deep water. Should the Total development on Venus actually start producing, it will be in the deepest water of any development ever. I think at the moment there's something in the Gulf of Mexico that is of the order of 3,500 meters seawater depth. Venus is of the order of 3,006, 3,007, that sort of area. So, as you can imagine, I mean, again, simplistically, but It's going to cost more money. There's more potential technical hurdles. You're going to be trying to do something that nobody's ever done before. So obviously the risk profile is higher, and accordingly they want to make some better guarantees with regard to their rates of return before they actually start spending money.
If I understand it also correctly, because I've been wondering about it, the Orange Basin at least partially extends into South Africa's waters, yet we do not see the same. No, it's not even the same. There's nothing. There's nothing around it in South Africa when it comes to this, compared to this massive Namibian buzz. Did the country just miss the boat, or where are we?
There, yeah, I mean, there's a few different factors. I suppose, first of all, Namibia was just a bit of ahead of the game. It was very good over the years, even whenever it was finding nothing. It was very good at attracting companies and awarding exploration acreage. So a lot of people got involved and picked up acreage with maybe minimal commitments. They didn't really have to do that much to it. They shot some seismic. They did this and that, whatever. But anyway, our understanding is Namibia. A, it was probably ahead of the game with regard to South Africa, and B, the environmental aspect of it is massive. Certainly with regard to South Africa, there's been a lot of your viewers and yourself will know there's been a lot of court cases acting against exploration, offshore exploration, indeed also onshore. I know the Karoo Basin has always been a very difficult area for explorers to really get involved in or really get active. But offshore, it's been broadly the same picture. So I think what oil and gas investors want, they want clarity of terms, they want stability, and they want to be able to drill. Now, the South African terms, not bad, but there's also been, there was a long, painful process to put through a new Petroleum Act, which may or may not be quite there, but there's still a few dots to be dotted and T's to be crossed there. And the
Mm.
environmental activity and the legal challenges have basically put off a lot of people. Now, I would say that seems to be changing. You're right that the Orange Basin does extend south into South African waters, and Shell and Total are now. I mean, you never say never because the environmental challenges will more than likely keep on coming. But the last few court cases seem to be encouraging for Total and Shell. So they've got, between the two of them, they've got 3 or 4 pretty big blocks. Now, as it stands at the moment, Total, we think there's a block called Deepwater Orange Basin, which basically is right up against the border with Namibia. So they're planning to drill there by the end of the year. They hope to. Then there's a further block, 3B, 4B. They've got a couple of wells that may be drilled next year, probably the first half of next year. And then beyond that, further south, there's another large block, 567, which you may well drill thereafter. Now, all these time frames, it's all subject to success. If they get into the Deepwater Orange Basin, drill at the end of this year, and find 1 billion barrels, then they're going to carry on drilling there rather than probably go further south. Equally, if they drill something there that is hopeless, they might go to 3B, 4B. They might not. All these
Mm.
things are subject to success. And also, Shell has got another block, Northern Cape Ultra Deep, which again, it's just next to Deepwater or Orange Basin, and again, it's just on the maritime border with Namibia. Now, it is hoping to drill. It's a little bit further behind with regard to Total, but it's hoping that perhaps it can. Well, it's looking at that block now, and subject to any environmental or legal challenges, it will be hopeful to drill on that block. My guess would be it wouldn't be before probably later next year at the earliest. So yeah, a lot of moving parts. I think there is, if the legal challenges are go in the oil and gas company's favor and they're allowed to drill, then we're looking at some activity or some significant activity in South African Orange Basin within the next 18 months.
Look, we can do with some FDI assistance right about now, our economy. So let's see what happens. I know there's still a lot of hurdles, but by when could we, if everything goes well and everything is this amazing as we kind of expect it to be, by when could we see actual Namibian oil reach the market?
Well, our thinking is the three discoveries or the three blocks with the discoveries on them. Total, its big discovery is called Venus. It is looking to make a final investment decision on that next year. That all going well, you'd probably see oil 27 at the earliest, probably 2028. It will be, it's probably wanting to try and fast track. The Namibians would be keen to try and fast track. Equally, they've got to carry on doing some studies. They've got to find the sweet spot. They've got to find the right vessel. They've got to work out, if we're going to fast track this part of the field, how about phase two? How about phase three? So there's a lot of again moving parts. But we think probably like 2028 might be the first production from Venus. Shell, the discovery, they're called Yonker and Graf. Graf was actually the first one on its block, but Yonker we think is probably the more likely to be developed first. It's a bit bigger and possibly less geologically complex. So we're thinking maybe 2029 for first oil from Shell, and then the most recent one was Galp. Discovered Mopani, which I think was in January this year. Now that's bigger than Yonker and Graf, our understanding. There's been some pretty eye-watering figures coming out over exactly how big that may be. We're a bit more cautious because there's only been 2 wells drilled there so far. So at the moment, that's maybe 2030. However, for first oil, I mean. However, we think there's a good chance that could switch places with Shell. So you might have Mopani first. Now, the reason behind, well, lots of uncertainty, but the reason behind we think it could switch places is it really could be very, very, very big. Um, but the other the other side of it is Galp is looking to try and sell. Now, Galp at the moment's got 80% in it. Now, it's not wanting really to operate; it's wanting to get a partner in. And an operating partner. So, it could end up selling the whole 80%, but we think at the moment it's probably going to sell about half of that stake. But therefore, there's some corporate activity that has to go on. They have to get a new partner in, they have to agree on a price, the regulator in Namibia have to sign it off, etc., etc. Now, we think in actual fact there's good momentum there. There's a lot of the biggest players that are looking at that discovery and looking at potentially farming in. So cautiously optimistic that deal should be done maybe by the end of this year. If that gets done, then it's all going to be on the front foot. We're into 2025. Maybe Mopani is FID'd by the end of 26, that sort of area, and then maybe 3-4 years thereafter. So a bit of a rambling response there, but 28, 29, 30 is broadly what we're looking at.
Somewhere around there. So nonetheless, it's still a while before Namibia can really capitalize on the black oil, but all the best for Namibia. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it will really be a modern day oil miracle story if this all comes to pass. David, thank you very much. We're going to be keeping a close eye. I'm sure I'm going to check in with you again on the developments. But thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
Yep, and yourself. Good to speak to you. Thank you.